Everyone, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Russell Mers. I'm chair of Enviromets Queensland, and we've been leading the development of this transformative post-mining land use options assessment tool. We're going to be launching this today, and I'll give you a brief introduction and welcome. First, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, sea, and waters where we live, learn, and work, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. I also acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us from across Australia and recognize the importance of Indigenous knowledge in caring for country. This is particularly relevant to today's session, where restoring and sustaining landscapes after mining must be guided by respect for country and informed by both science and traditional knowledge. So today in our session, we have a few presenters. We'll be switching back and forth, but we've got Ross Browning and Ian Dover from Enviromets, and we have Brian Maybe and Gillian Durso from CRC Time. So before we start, just note that we will have a short Q&A at the conclusion of the webinar. And just to expedite this process, I just encourage any of you to enter questions in the chat. And we've got a couple of people that can go through those and streamline them so that we can have a great question session at the end. And also just please like to let you know that you can expect a follow-up after the session with a recording, notes, links to this key resources from today, and responses to any questions that we don't get to during the Q&A. So let's begin. I'll pass on to Ross Browning to get us started on the details.
Thank you, Russell. And thank you for everyone's interest and the opportunity to present today. So as Russell said, my name's Ross Browning. I'm a non-executive director with Enviromets, and I've also had the pleasure to coordinate the tool development along with Brian and Ian and others. But the slide you've got there really overviews why this is a burning issue and why we've dedicated so much resources and effort and to get to where we are. And that is the issue we're all so familiar with, and that's the broken model at times of unacceptable abandoned mines that you see there, which is really a failure. And what does that mean? It's a liability to the community, but it's also a reputational issue for the mining industry more broadly. There's potential and at times economic and environmental issues. The current default is, again, as we all know, is to go back to what was there before. That's typically native pasture, native or pasture, typically relatively low value, certainly compared to mining. And this comes about because of the approvals and subsequent compliance obligations thereafter. What's wasted there is infrastructure and the loss of opportunity in regional Queensland, Australia. And finally, what is that opportunity? And there's many examples of across the world where it has transformed post-mining land use opportunities for the benefit of communities and in particular traditional owners. Here's next slide, please. So the post-mining land use options assessment tool webinar, we're going to cover at a high level the tool. It's not a run through, and particularly given the time, but there are other documents, and Julian will cover that later on, including a user guide or user guides for the two tools. So what this is we're encouraging, obviously, a transition from compliance-driven to value creation for post-mining land use. The tool is a simple, easy to use and practical tool, and it uses real data to make comparisons. And in particular, illustrates those comparisons to display and makes it a very easy and intuitive outcomes. Next slide. So there's a lot gone in over the couple of years since this tool started development to where we are today, and hopefully a lot further to go. It's certainly first and foremost to acknowledge the Queensland government and the Australian government through both Enviromets and CRC Time, and through the funding through the REF program. So there are also a lot of other organisations and people that have supported the development of the tool. Local councils, shires in Queensland have contributed expertise and funding as well. We've had a whole lot of in-kind contribution and support, and that expertise, I think, sets this tool somewhat apart, because the contribution and expertise right across our ecosystem has been fantastic and invaluable in getting it to where it is. We've trialled the tool through with mine owners, and obviously private mine owners like Whitehaven, and acknowledging Rainer and a team, but also the abandoned mine sector through Department of Natural Resources and Mines, Manufacturing and Regional and Rural Development, in particular Karen and her team. And there's others. And that's been really important to get the tool to the quality that it is. Also, all the supporters for Enviromets and obviously partners for CRC Time, and the METS companies, and also really acknowledge the Enviromets board and team. And in the team, really acknowledge the expertise and professionalism and commitment of Brian and Ian. Thank you, guys. And finally, we've had some really great feedback, and obviously we're biased and proud of the tool, but we certainly hope that this has an important role to play in unlocking future post-mining land use value for regional communities in Queensland and more broadly Australia. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Brian to run through the tool in more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Look, thanks, Ross. As mentioned, my name is Brian Mabey. For those who don't know me, I am the program lead for risk evaluation and planning within CRC Time. And I have been working, I guess, with Ian to lead the technical development of the tools that we're going to talk about today and release today. So I guess if, Jillian, you go to the next slide. I guess if we ask why a post-mining land use tool, well, the decision is involves a complex process. There's numerous options, lots of alternatives out there. And to decide amongst these alternatives, we really have to look across the fact that there's also a number of stakeholders involved. It's much broader usually than we anticipate. And all those stakeholders will have varying perspectives on value and what they see as being valuable. At the same time, the drivers of value, or the factors that we use to make those decisions, will come from a number of different disciplines. And that complexity makes it a very, very tough decision to make. And so what this, as Ross mentioned, what the tool does is it creates that framework that not only displays the information in a way that you can make comparisons, but also suggests the data that's needed to make the decision. And it does this all in a very consistent fashion. Jillian, can you click once? Thanks. So I guess where does the tool fit? Well, across the top here, there is a process that is a very simple process, but one that a lot of companies and a lot of people follow when they're looking at making that decision of what post-mining land use to implement. And it starts with the identification of stakeholders and site characteristics. We then look at alternatives. We identify and score feasible options. We then look at hybrids or other scenarios that might be applicable, quantify them, and move it on to review for investability with stakeholders. And I guess across the top there, we tried to put in what the sort of data is that's available. And that sort of pre-feasibility and business case happens beyond where this tool is positioned. We're looking very much at that early stage scoping level style of information. And Julian, if you can click once. Thank you. So within that ideation process, there's lots of different ways that we can come up with ideas, come up with the options and the alternatives that we might consider for implementation. There's different frameworks that have been produced through work both within the CRC time and external to it. There's global best practice or global examples of what's been done in other parts of the world that exist. And where this tool fits, Jillian, if you can click once, is sort of after that ideation has been made, it really looks at facilitating the identification of the potential alternatives and then testing their feasibility. It enables the assessment of hybrids, so those, I guess, alternatives that are not mutually exclusive and can be implemented in harmony. Look at what the value of those might be. And it looks at the quantification for communication purposes. So what it offers is comparative values. We're not doing absolute values in this, but the tool offers comparative values so you can assess the comparison between alternatives. It removes biases by decoupling the identification of criteria for assessment from the options themselves that have been identified and the stakeholders assessing them. So it keeps a very consistent way of viewing the comparison. It facilitates understanding of different perspectives. Everybody has a different value proposition, and I'll talk a bit about that. We'll talk about that as we go. We've been able to start incorporating intangible factors into the evaluation, and it's applicable, I guess, throughout the mining life cycle from early stage planning right through to the time that we're going to close and looking at legacy sites going forward. Jillian, can you click one more, please? So what is it doing? I guess the tool is actually deployed as two versions. And Jillian, if you click once, the first version is what's called the scored options version. And that scored option version identifies and evaluates a large number of options with a broad group of stakeholders. If we want to think about it another way, we're trying to cast the net as wide as we can. We're trying to get all those options, all those alternatives on the table early. If you can click again, Jillian. The second, I guess, implementation is what's called the quantified value version. And that version then takes that wide range of alternatives and starts to evaluate them for quantum. It brings in that quantum, that monetary value of each, so they can be compared. And this allows us to think about, well, what is actually feasible and what is sustainable going forward for implementation. And so by casting the net wide, we then narrow it down by feasibility and sustainability to the alternatives that ultimately we're looking to implement. Can you click one more, Julian? And so, look, as an engineer, I like my engineering diagrams. In the top right is typical engineering diagram, where as we move through the stages of study from scoping to pre-feasibility to feasibility to execution, there's an increasing level of detail that exists in the information that we have available to us when making decisions. Unfortunately, as we move through those stages, we also get decreasing influence because the ability to make changes decreases as infrastructure is put in place, as decisions are made, and the cost to actually make a change increases. So it becomes much more expensive. So just click once. What we want to do is actually move that decision point where we have detailed, good data to make a decision forward to when those changes can actually be made at a reasonable cost. And of course, we want to do this with the data or with a level of accuracy that allows the same decision to be made as would be made later on. And so that's sort of where we position this, and that's what we're trying to get through. So I might now actually pass over to Ian to go through sort of the implementation of the model and our scored options version.
Thanks, Brian. And may I open by saying how much I enjoyed working with the team to develop and test this options comparison tool. So there are four, the tool has four sets of drivers. We can see them here. There's the drivers for enterprise value, for environmental value, for cultural and heritage value, and also for community or regional value. And an enterprise or economic set compares values associated with continued mining, perhaps for a secondary mineral or for mine waste reprocessing, for infrastructure reuse, or for totally new enterprises to be established in or around the existing mine following mine closure. There's an environmental set that reflects ecosystem services, water systems, biodiversity, etc. What's very unique about this is we now have a cultural and heritage set of values to value cultural landscapes, for example, or heritage assets, Indigenous land rights, and so on. And then finally, a community or regional set to value things like skills development, employment, population well-being, and diversification of regions following mining. Each of these four driver sets was developed by working with a team of experts in each of these disciplines. And we had multiple iterations of the value drivers to arrive at the unbiased set that you will see in the tool. Next slide, please. So just very briefly, and you will be able to achieve a lot more understanding by looking at the user guide. The enterprise drivers, the primary drivers of value here are financial attractiveness. In other words, what's the return on investment? Regulatory ease or costs of complying with the regulations, investor attractiveness, and also the availability of grants or tax relief or other government support, which can make a new enterprise more attractive. I'm not going to go through the quantifiable components, but each of these main drivers have components that are used actually to find the quantifiable data. Okay, moving to the environmental drivers, we have impact on water, or for example, the landform resilience. We've got issues such as greenhouse gas inputs and also air quality. And again, a number of secondary components there as well. Next click, please. So in the cultural and heritage drivers, we have a visual amenity. We have native title impact. There's the impact on national heritage significance. In particular here, we've got the Indigenous business impacts and also then Indigenous employment impact. Those two are somewhat related, but again, we have secondary components there of all of these drivers. And then finally, if we can move to the community and regional drivers, this is by far the largest of the set. Value, if you like, of direct and indirect employment. We've got issues such as financial benefits, for community and on the region as a result of the changes of implementing the options. We've got capability development or upskilling or diversification of capabilities, changes in the quality of the place in surrounding the mine, and so on. These things provide an understanding and value of the community and regional drivers. Next slide, please. Okay, so here in this example, we've got the options that were considered by the stakeholders for a particular mine site. In addition to a base case that was the original post-mine land usage. We can see specific options across the top there, like mining of waste, natural environment, geotourism, soft adventure, and also light manufacturing or services. Across to the right-hand side in green, there are hybrid options where we can add a couple of these single options together and look at the value associated with having maybe 2 or 3 or even 4 new enterprises associated with these. Can we click to the next part, please? Okay, so let's have a look at the one of these, the mining of waste. And the stakeholder groups are able to score each of the value drivers in comparison to a base case, which is 0. And so in this case, we've got a total score for enterprise and environmental and community and cultural of 18. And you can see that that's made up of 2 and -2, 13 and 5. So the scoring achieves a value as a result of looking at the score from -2 to +2. -1, for example, is slightly negative compared to the base case. -2 is even more negative. +1 is slightly positive compared to the base case, and 2 is more positive. So this is the way we actually look at each of the options. Let's have a look at the next click, please. Go to the natural environment option. Now, if we've scored these, the stakeholders could score these, and we see underneath on the left-hand side that the total value there is 20. And so in this particular case, what we've found is that the return to the natural environment as an option here has a slightly higher value than if we're talking about the mining of waste as one example of a new enterprise. We need to also understand that figure, those figures were produced with an equal weighting. So we've got all of the drivers, the enterprise, the environmental, and so on. All those drivers, the driver sets, are weighted equally, in this case with 1. On the right-hand side, we actually can see the values associated, the total net value associated with the options. And so this is this gives us a good understanding of how these different options rate in comparison with each other and with the base case. Can we have another click, please, Gillian? What we can do, though, is look at the stakeholder interests and the stakeholder importance, and we can change the weightings. So each of the driver sets, can have a different weighting. And in this case, what we've done is that we've actually put a more social, a higher level on the social value, such as the cultural and the community value. And in the left-hand side at the bottom, we see 1.5 and 1.5 versus 0.5 and 0.5. And what that does is change the actual total net value of the different options that we're considering. Can we? Okay, now back to Brian, because this part is important. Those options now can be translated into a quantified value. Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Ian. And look, thanks for that, Ian. So as we mentioned, there's 2 implementations of the option assessment tool. The second implementation is what we've called the quantified value version, and it's used to assess the attractive options for their quantum. So looking beyond what is desirable and looking at the feasibility and sustainability of those pieces, and looking at communicating those values in a way that is consistent across stakeholders, things that people understand. This version uses the same drivers and driver sets as the scored options version. And this is an important piece of this tool because it, as I mentioned, it decouples the criteria that are being used from the alternatives that are identified and the people making the decision. It makes for a very consistent way of comparing multiple alternatives by multiple groups. So everyone gets the same feel of what the value is from a common grounding that they can then introduce their perspectives on, as Ian mentioned, and I'll bring that back in a second here. So Gillian, if I just click through to the next slide, and we look at the quantification of the enterprise value drivers, you'll see that each of those drivers is being quantified based on factors that were identified during the development through our consultation with practitioners and experts in different areas on what impacts the value for that driver. And it uses those factors that were viewed as being important for the purposes of making a comparison. Okay? If you click again, Jillian, this is the same for the environmental drivers, which have the same issue or the same thing. The factors of importance were identified. And what you'll notice here is that some of the driver valuations are actually left blank. And that's on purpose because it really depends on the situation and the data availability. Not all drivers need to be quantified for every comparison. Some may not make sense. And so when we get into that quantified value version, there is that flexibility to do that. If we continue through to the cultural and heritage drivers, you'll also notice that some of these drivers, particularly in this area, are very tough to quantify. This is a newer area. It's something that we've included through development of this tool. And we've actually managed to put some quantification around some of these, what I'll call tangible, tough to quantify intangible type pieces. And this is an area of continued research going forward, as it is an important part in the valuation of the different alternatives. And if we move finally to the community and regional drivers, again, they are quantified based on those factors that are considered to impact the comparison. And data for completing these will be drawn from a number of different sources. Now, I'm not going to go into each of them individually. Just wanted to give you an overview of how they're quantified. And as Ian mentioned, the user guides that will accompany the tool, or that do accompany the tool, actually step through the valuation of each one and what is needed and how you go about quantifying each of these drivers within the tool. Jillian, if you can click to the next, if we return now to our example of an equal weighted view of alternatives, the one that Ian put up with the scored options model, and we look at how that is valued in the quantified valuation. Jillian, if you can click the next piece. Yes. The QV version now places the quantum around each of the alternatives that rose to the top. In this case, the natural environment, geotourism, and mining of waste were seen in the scored options version in that assessment process as being of high value for the group that was doing the scoring. Now that we brought the quantum in, though, what's interesting is some of those alternatives, while desirable, may actually not be feasible as far as implementation goes. They may cost more to put in place, and there may not be funding to do it, just as an example. So that's where the quantified value version really helps bring in that feasibility around what can be implemented versus what we would like to have implemented. And Jillian, if you click to the next slide. Yeah, and we don't just have to use the even weighting. We can also allow for a different value proposition to be put around the scoring. And so this is where we then weight the different driver sets differently. And in this case, it's what we've called a social weighting or a social focus, where the group is more concerned with the community regional drivers and the cultural heritage drivers. And what we see is a difference in the valuation that comes out across the bottom for each of the alternatives. But I guess what's important here is that the underlying driver sets do not change. And that's how we are able to decouple the valuation of it from the people actually doing the scoring or the value from the people actually doing the valuation. So we remove the biases. The perspective, the value proposition being brought back in then allows people to view their own biases on it, their own perspectives, their own value proposition. But if you click to the next slide, Jillian, it also lets you view other value propositions. And if I can get you to click this twice, you can view other value propositions as well. And then we can compare those and we can start to get a feel for why somebody else would view different alternatives in different ways. And by doing that, and because of the way the model is developed and the way the valuation is done, you can actually track back through the calculations to identify what factors are the ones that cause the differences or that cause issues, maybe issues that cause challenges in implementation that need to be addressed, and which ones we are on the same page with, depending, no matter what we look at. So, Jillian, if I could just, next slide. Just in closing, the post-mining land use option assessment tool provides a framework that facilitates decision-making at a strategic level through three, key areas. One, through data collection. So it helps to identify what data is required to make the comparison. And this is because of that consistent set of value drivers that's used across all alternatives by all users. And it also helps to identify what data gaps there are and what needs some further assessment. When we think about data analysis, it enables perspectives to be viewed through different value propositions, and not just your own, but you can assess what somebody else's value proposition might look like and how that may change the ranking or the ordering, the comparative nature of the different alternatives. It also allows for, or it facilitates viewing value enhancements, or looking at value enhancements through what we've called hybrids. And this is the idea that if two alternatives are not mutually exclusive, it may make sense to put them together as a scenario, and if they can be implemented in harmony, and see what kind of value increase we can get from that. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. We can look at it in different proportions based on what kind of land area there is and how much of each might come together. And finally, it transforms the discussion through that stakeholder discussion. And there's three ways that it does this. First of all, we found that it facilitates conversations among stakeholders that traditionally would not have had certain conversations. So it helps to facilitate that because there's a common platform upon which the information is being presented. It presents the comparisons against a consistent set of value drivers, so they don't change based on what the option is and who's doing it. They are consistent, and they're used that way for the comparison purposes. And it actually starts to quantify components of things that were previously subjective opinions that were used, and starts to look at how we quantify them and what we put together. So with that, I might then pass back to Jillian to close off the session.
Thank you so much, Brian, and hello everyone. I'm Jillian Durso, an External Relations and Impact Director at CRC Time, and I have the opportunity to come and close out and say a few words on behalf of the broader CRC Time team, and also have the excitement of telling you that the tool is now available for download with a whole range of supporting materials to really help you get the most out of it. As a cooperative research centre, one of the most important things to us is not only delivering research that is practical and user focused, but making sure that we return it, what is created, to the people that helped us in the development process. And so that's why we put a lot of effort into making sure that there are supporting information sheets, videos, and other guidance to help you make the most of the tool. You'll also, we'll put it in the chat shortly, but we also at CRC Time have made a lot of the research that's been undertaken so far in the broader post-mining land use space available through our user-focused post-mining land use toolkit and a supporting regional collaboration governance and planning toolkit, and we'll put those in the chats as well. Further, we are looking to invest as a CRC in developing the tool from the current P50 version through to the P80 version. And for that, we are looking at partners and also trial site or pilot sites to really help us further develop and make the tool even more robust. So I encourage you to visit the website. I will put the links in the chat, but I also wanted to join others in thanking everyone, the many people and organisations that took time to be part of the development of the tool. It really was a collaborative effort, and it's incredibly important that we recognise that it's those efforts which we hope will deliver a product that's useful for regions and industry and communities across Australia. With that in mind, I'll hand back to Russell, who will facilitate a number of questions and then make an announcement.
Great, thanks, Jillian. Thanks, Ross, Ian, and Brian, for presenting the tool. I think that's fantastic. I think it gives us an overview of this first version of the tool that we're really proud to be delivering. I see a number of questions that have just popped up in the chat. I'd just like to invite Brian, maybe if you'd like to read through some of those and see if you can pull off some answers to them, or maybe refer to Ian if you need to.
Okay, thanks, Russell. Look, I guess I'll just go back, and I guess Will asked a question there around scoring things that add up the figures. You know, the way that we presented the tool, we score individuals and then add it up, and whether the tool can be used in an opposite way to look at the total and then deductively identify what values seem to be driving people towards certain opinions. And I guess I'll step back there and say, Gillian mentioned that this is a P50 version. It's a first version being released. There will be further enhancements done to it. We're looking at developing it further. The answer to that question is not, I guess, is not explicitly. It won't do that, other than it's set up to create the value from the sum of the parts. However, because of the way that value comes through, you can backtrack through from it. I guess it's in the way that it's used, and I would say yes, but not exclusively. That's not explicitly how it's been developed at this point in time. But I'm taking these on board because I think there are these questions will provide some very interesting further work that we would want to look at. The second one, sorry.
Keep going.
Okay, the second, I guess another question there, does the tool allow for multiple scenarios, simulations, i.e. changing values and weighting? I don't know, Ian, do you want to talk a bit about the weightings there?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So, yeah, I think that question and the one following are similar in that we can, I guess, look at different perspectives. We can look at multiple scenarios. We can look at the risks associated with those, not necessarily as a risk management tool, but the different opinions, if you like, and the different understanding of the different stakeholders, or even within one stakeholder group, you know, different people within a mining operation, you know, can put their views forward through the weightings and through the scoring, and that then will actually provide a really robust discussion option that will get you to a level of understanding and get all people to a level of understanding that they will not have had before, when there was just sort of one view of the option. I'll leave it at that, Brian.
And I might add there that that next question talks a bit about the potential to deliver the anticipated value and the risks associated with them. Now, again, the risk is an area of research that is ongoing and one that will influence further development in this tool. The tool itself, right now, when you move from the scored options version into the quantified value, uses discounting of processed data in order to identify risk and uncertainty or in the certain areas. Now, we have put in some work which is in the project looking at what the different discount rates are or should be for the various driver sets, because we do recognize that not all driver sets will be equally uncertain, if that makes sense. I guess you know, discounting away value on from a business revenue stream or cash flow stream is different than discounting a cash flow stream or a monetary value stream that arises from an environmental asset. And so we have looked at how those discount rates for each driver set should relate to each other. And in the tool, and this is explained, I guess, again, in the user guides and the documentation that goes on with it, there is a setting that's there initially But I wanted to note that the tool is built very flexibly. It is in a spreadsheet format, that built in spreadsheets, and anything can be changed. So there are pre-specified what's been suggested to be used in different areas for certain components, but those can be changed and overridden with user access. And so the idea is that it's flexible and it can actually look at the risk, the uncertainty, how different components, different options may actually adjust going forward. So that was a bit of a long-winded way, I guess, of jumping into to answer that one. As far as the recording being shared, yes, Jillian, I believe that is going to be shared.
Yes, so the recording will be shared and it'll be available. We'll send it out in the post-webinar link. So everyone that's registered will receive a copy of the a link to the presentation, the webinar, as well as the downloadable tool. And early next week, we'll also upload this webinar to the PMLU options assessment tool part of our website, so you can access it on an ongoing basis.
And I realize there's a bunch of questions that keep coming in, and I think what we're going to do is, I realize we're approaching
we're going to
time. And so what I might say is, Jillian, we'll collect those questions and we'll look at getting back to people and getting answers out based on those questions. But then I might hand back to Jillian or I guess Russell at this point to close out.
There will definitely be an FAQ sheet, and we'll work on that and we'll get it out to you as soon as we can. Over to you, Russell.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Brian, Jillian. And I think this has been a great introduction. I just really strongly encourage all of you on the call today to look at the website, download the guides, download the tool. We really want to use this in anger. We've had some really fantastic trials and demos with industry and community. And we feel we've got a very strong tool, but it'll only get better with its use. And really want people to be using this and see what options can be made available and how that can start the discussion going forward. So I'd just like to quickly make an announcement about Enviromets. We've been really pleased to be working with CRC Time and other partners on this particular project. And we really feel that as Enviromets Queensland over the last 4 years, we've achieved, numerous highly successful projects. Some of them we've named our Lighthouse projects, Lighthouse 1, and this is Lighthouse 2. But this really success of this tool and its use going forward is something that we're all very proud of. We're proud of the impact we've had over the last couple of years in raising awareness of innovative and sustainable ways to make mining impacted land more valuable to its current and future custodians. So I think our messages and tools from the past 4 years reach not only across Queensland, but around Australia and to the international post-mining land use community. So I would like to express a massive thank you to Ellen Martin, our Executive Director, Mark Johansson, Ross Browning, and all our other staff at Enviromets. And we really appreciate the commitment of our group of non-executive directors over the few years and the partners that have contributed so much to the organization and to our messaging. But I do want to announce that after careful consideration, we've made the difficult decision to bring our organization to a close. It's not been easy. It's not an easy choice, but it reflects a range of factors and been made with the deep thought about what sustainable and responsible organization is going forward. So Enviromets is in the process of winding up now that we're delivering this Lighthouse 2 initiative, the post-mining options assessment tool. So to our team, partners, and community, thank you very much for your support, trust, and contributions. You've made this work meaningful and moved the dial in awareness of transformative post-mining land uses to sustain our communities. So again, I encourage all of you to explore the tool, look for opportunities to use it, and let's see if we can really make a difference going forward in post-mining land use. Thank you very much.
And thank you everyone for joining today. We will make the recording available to you. And I wanted to just acknowledge Environments for the partnership that we've had in place over the years. And we're really excited to take development of the tool through further.